Hello, my name is Sandra Timcoe, and welcome to Lumen Christi. I'd like to start our time together by reading from Isaiah 58, verse 6 and 7, a piece of scripture that I think applies beautifully to the guest that we have today. This, rather, is the fasting that I wish, releasing those bound unjustly, untying the thongs of the yoke, setting free the oppressed, breaking every yoke, sharing your bread with the hungry, sheltering the oppressed and the homeless, clothing the naked when you see them, and not turning on your own. And this is, I think it's indicative to a man who has been on a long journey. He has come to a place where he is helping the multitudes understand the truth. And he happens to go to the same church I do, and I just met him today for the first time. This is Russ Morgan. Welcome.
Thank you.
And Russ was a special gift to me personally today because for 20 years of doing Lumen Christi, and I mentioned the last time we were together taping with Father Genuine that we are in a temporary home right now, and everything is in transition. One of the requests I had of the Lord for 21 years was, please bring us somebody that can represent the Knights of Columbus and all the good work they do. And I was never getting a response. With the return of my youngest son home to me yesterday, and Russ's return here to share with us, he is a Knight of Columbus. So this was a great gift. But you didn't get to the Knights of Columbus walking out of a household filled with Catholics. Tell us your story. It's amazing.
Well, I wasn't born into a Catholic family. My grandfathers and my father were all Baptist preachers. So when I talk about growing up in the Baptist church, I literally grew up in the Baptist church. It was a place that wasn't just a Sunday excursion for us. It was Sundays, it was Wednesdays, it was the occasional potluck. It was all of those things that a faith community should be. And that's how I grew up. I really didn't have any experience at all with the Catholic Church.
So your influences, you said in your bio that your grandfather was a great influence, your father was a great influence on your faith walk, and you marry, you have children, and where does life take you then?
Well, I think it would be safe to say that my grandfather, who passed away years ago, and my father are still great faith influences for me. A lot of what I became was because of what they gave me when I was younger. And coming to the Catholic Church was really sort of a fulfillment of a lot of what they started. I did marry. My wife is Catholic. We do have children. But coming to the church, probably through her, was really more of a completion of the work that they began in me.
Well, I want to talk about the fact that you've been married once before.
Mm-hmm.
And how long were you married?
About 9 years.
And you have children?
I do. From the first marriage, I have 3.
And your current wife was married as well?
She was.
And how long was she married?
I believe she was married about 7 years.
The reason that I mention that is because many people feel, and I was included in that, I was married 35 years, and divorce came crashing. You go through a time, especially if you've had an intense faith journey, where you think perhaps the Lord can't use you in that, because we know that marriage is for life, it's eternal, and so on and so on. But he's bigger than all of that. Do you agree?
I agree. I think he works best with the broken pieces. For those things in our lives that don't quite work out like we planned. Oftentimes I think it leads us more in line with what he has planned.
So you come out of your marriage, and where were you in your faith walk then?
Started, probably. It really wasn't the center of my life. I had a lot of other things that I was working on, trying to remain a good father for my children, trying to get over the loss that comes with divorce. And so it was a daily life for me. There was nothing really that was long-term for me at that point.
When I said earlier you've returned to us, though this is your first time, I'm thinking about what I read in your bio, because you mentioned returning home. Mm-hmm. And many people that converted to the Catholic faith or have reconverted to the Catholic faith, they phrase it that way, I've come home, I've come home. Did you feel that, and this is so sweet, your children were in the catechism program and you were learning along with them?
Yeah. Whenever I share my conversion story, I usually refer to myself as an accidental Catholic. We were married, and my wife and I had the discussion about what we would do with the children. And of course, I thought faith was important. And so we registered them at our home parish, which is now St. Kieran, for the children's religious education program. They have a family-based program where the children would go one night a month to a classroom with a catechist and talk about the work that they had done at home. And the parents then would go into another room where they would basically receive enough instruction to help their children understand their lessons. We received children's catechesis sort of at an adult level. But as I sat there for a year...
Wait a minute, explain that. You received children's catechesis at an adult level.
Children ask questions, and they're not afraid to ask the questions. They don't have an inhibition, so they question everything. And I think the church understood that by teaching us that we needed to get beyond what we thought we knew to be able to explain things to them on a level they could understand, so it was more age appropriate. And as I sat there and I listened, I realized that there was very little the Catholic Church offered that was much different from what I had grown up with. I often refer to it now as living with a faith that was an inch deep and a mile wide. And as we went through that year, I became more and more convinced that I had missed a lot of the truth.
So, if I've got this right, you said your faith was an inch deep, but a mile wide.
Mm-hmm.
That faith being what you brought from the Baptist
Yes.
Denomination.
Mm-hmm.
So, all of a sudden, you're being enlightened, but you see the similarities.
Mm-hmm.
You see our commonalities in our walks with Christ, and probably even a little bit of the theologies. There had to be some similarities.
Oh, absolutely.
So you're hitting upon some things, though, that are unique to the Catholic Church, which would be the true presence in the Eucharist and Blessed Mother's role and purgatory and so on. How did you accept and deal with that?
It really wasn't necessarily a question of accepting. Growing up as we did in the faith, there were a lot of things I simply didn't question. I made a lot of assumptions, perhaps when I was younger, about what the Baptist Church was teaching us. So when we discussed, for instance, the real presence in the Eucharist, and the church said that, when Jesus said, "This is my body, this is my blood," that's what he meant. To me, that seemed perfectly reasonable. If he had wanted to say it was like his body, then he could have said it was like his body. He knew how to use those similarities in the parables that he taught. And yet at this particular moment with his disciples, he was very clear when he said, "This is."
I had this conversation with somebody just recently because they have a real negative opinion of the Catholic Church. And I mentioned that the other night I went and saw a comedian who's a world-renowned and known as the Queen of Clean and known for her Christian humor and so on, but everyday humor as well. And she mentioned that her faith was taken deeper when she went to the Holy Land. And she said, "I put my hand in that hole under the altar where they believe Christ's cross was put into the ground." And she said, "At that moment, I knew it was all real. And I had to be grateful that the Catholic Church provided us, through history now, to keep those places intact and sacred and taken care of." And I was the only one in the audience. I went, "Yay!" And then she turned to the audience and she said, "No matter how you look at this, we all started in the same place," referring to the Catholic Church. No matter how you look at it, the historical proof is in the chronological order of the papacy.
Yep.
So you can dissect and swerve away and think what you want, but when the rubber meets the road, that's a historical fact. You didn't even have to struggle with any of that, it sounds like.
No, not really. I think I was just at the right time in my life. I had just come through the divorce, and I had custody of my children for a year prior to meeting my wife. And once we got married, it just seemed the right time for things were changing for me, and I was very open to that change. So I think it was at that particular moment that God simply said, okay, now you're ready for the work that needs to begin.
In case we are just being turned on, you're set, and you're wondering, who is this man who's so articulate and so composed and in control of his faith journey? It just sounds like you nailed it from the time you were little. This is Russ Morgan. He is from St. Kieran's Parish, which happens to be mine, and I never knew him until today. And we'll be doing 2 segments with Russ, and the thrill for me, of course, is meeting you, and it's always encouraging to hear everybody's testimony. It's encouraging on some level. It affects all of us. But the idea that you were a twin in the womb, which I found out late in life that I had been as well, and your walk and journey into service in the church, you've become God's hands. You've become Jesus' hands, and also your commitment to the Knights of Columbus. So all of a sudden, you're learning this child-level catechism, and it's taking you forward. It's moving you forward. All of a sudden, you get invited to be active in these other areas in the church, all these ministries. What are you doing now?
Coming into the day to experience it again, not because there was something missing from the Easter Vigil experience that I had, but because for 9 months we had been catechumens, and despite the support of the community, which was fantastic, we were still separate. And that was the first Sunday when I, sat with everyone else and got in line with everyone else and did what everyone else was doing the way they were doing it. And that made a tremendous impression on me, to think that, this is available to us every week. And I wanted to be basically the agent, I suppose, that would bring others to that experience. It's
a powerful, powerful sacrament. I remember as a Eucharistic minister, as I'd look at the crowd coming, and there was this hunger. You could sense there was a hunger. Everybody was coming with a different wound, with a different need, with a different gratitude. And you're giving them the bread of life. You're giving them Jesus Christ, What more could you give somebody? Right. And I would always be moved to tears before the communion was over. It was so incredibly powerful. And to think that there are masses going on at every minute of the day all over the world, how we're all unified in that. In this conversation I had with one of my Protestant brothers recently, we talked about communion. And there was this understanding that is just a beautiful commemoration of the Last Supper. Okay? And the church has their commemoration once a month with wafers and grape juice. And I said, it's a beautiful unifying experience, even at that level. But he said exactly what you said. Take this. This is my body. And there's such an infusion of power and healing through it. Anything we ask when we go up there to receive him, he's coming into us. And since we are what we eat, we're taking and we're ingesting more of Jesus himself. It's just so powerful. Even at the cup, his precious blood, which has the power to destroy sin. It's just amazing. So you have this new understanding, and you're a Eucharistic minister. And then what else did you get involved in?
Probably my greatest passion right now in the church would be youth ministry. We were talking before we began today about the gap that exists within our church from the time our young people are confirmed until they've gone through college and moved out on their own. Really entered a portion of life where they have to make their own decisions, many for the first time. And without that foundation, I think a lot of them really struggle to stay on the path. We're blessed at our home parish at St. Kieran's with a wonderful group of high school students. We have 40 or 50 of them a week that come together not just to share their faith, but to share their friendship, to share their love, to share their laughter, and then to include us into it. It's a tremendous blessing for us to do that. And honestly, those young people have, over the last few years, have really changed my life and my perception of the church going forward.
There is that gap you're talking about, and that's sad. I know that Theology on Tap, which for people that aren't aware of it, for young adults that frequent certain areas, restaurants and bars, pubs and so on, they have guest...
There's a new program, actually, that's developed. It's a nationwide program called Young Catholic Professionals, which has just opened up in our archdiocese for the 20-somethings, those who are in college or just coming out, and trying to find a way to coordinate their lives with their faith at the center instead of on the periphery, to let them know that it is okay to live as a person of faith and be a professional as well.
What's it called?
Young Catholic Professionals.
So if somebody went online, could they get some information about that?
They could. I believe the website is ycp.org, and they offer a mentored speaker series from all different professions. They also have social gatherings where they can simply come together to let them know that they're not alone in that particular search.
So right now, currently, we don't have much time. I don't know how much time we have left. But we will, on the second segment of this, I want to really delve into what the Knights of Columbus has meant to you, because my father was a third-degree Knight as well, and how you even got involved. But a personal understanding of who Blessed Mother has come to mean to you.
Yeah.
Tell me that.
Growing up in the Baptist Church, Mary was not a central figure in our faith. Most likely relegated to simply the Christmas pageant at Christmas time. But come to realize that being that, literally that first disciple, right?
Well, wait a minute, let me ask you this. Okay, even in your Christmas pageant, was she always wearing blue?
She was always wearing blue.
It's like Mary only had one outfit, you know.
Yes. And in fact, I think we had to keep the outfit year after year to make sure that it was always the same for her. But we come to realize that in her willingness to do it, in her exercising of that free will to simply say yes, that in that ultimate surrender of everything that she had to be that first disciple, to be that first apostle, that becomes a symbol for us of what we should be, the first role model that we should. Jesus' first role model, right, as a child growing up. So we would probably say that if it were good enough for him in his formation, it should be good enough for us.
Him and his formation, that's an interesting way to put it. So, but I want to know deeper. She was not a central figure.
No.
She was the child in the blue at the Christmas pageant. And when they started mentioning Blessed Mother, and the powerful intercessor she is, and how her fiat changed everything.
Yes.
Were you finding that hard to believe? Or her visitations and the apparitions all over the world throughout history?
No, I really didn't. I think because by the time I had come to the understanding of the role of Mary in the church, I wanted it to be true. The appeal of someone who could be born fully human, and yet could surrender themselves to that kind of life was tremendously appealing. It answered a lot of questions, but the first one being, can I do this? And the answer, I think, was yes, we can. Not without help, but it certainly doesn't hurt us to go to someone who's been through that before, right, and seek her intercession so that we do have that guide to get us through those points when we start to doubt ourselves.
Wow, that's really good. This week, my relationship with Blessed Mother, the last 15 days, has been taken to a whole new level. We were trying radically to get my son home. It was just not. People will say, well, why didn't you put him on a plane? Why didn't you put him on a train or a bus? It was beyond all of that, okay? And every adverse situation that could have possibly came up. Some of the areas were so dangerous. And when I wouldn't hear from him, for days or hours and hours and hours, I was just putting it all in Christ's hands. I believed because he brought some things into my life before this was even a possibility that he was coming. They arrived at my house, and I thought, he's getting ready to bring him home. I mean, there would be no other reason that this is happening. And then, of course, days later, the movement started. But there was one segment of time where there was almost 24 hours. There was no word. And I refused to allow the enemy to put any of these thoughts in my head. You know, I'm sorry, I'm not buying it. My son's coming home. He's already prepared these things, all right?
Mm-hmm.
But there was a moment there where I thought about how she must have felt when Jesus was lost in the temple and away from them for 3 days. And how could you do this to us, son? And he said, don't you know that I'm to be about my Father's business? And several phone calls, I mean, I'd be like, what the heck's the matter with you? You've got to stay in touch here. We've got to know what's going on. So I felt a new level of respect. There's always been devotion and love,
Mm-hmm.
but there was a new respect. Do you know what I'm saying?
I do.
And surely, as a parent, in your surrender to Christ and understanding how hard that had to have been. And your question was not, geez, she was amazing. Your first question was, can I do that too? That is so impressive. Do you think you are?
I try. I don't know. You know, I'm one of those people that believes that how we manage things as a parent will be probably revealed to us when we have grandchildren. Because that's really where we see how our children turned out. So,
wow, I've never heard that. That is so good. That is so good. Okay, let's just say, because our time is up with our listening audience in Florida, we have to wind this up, and then we'll come back and finish with our viewing families. Perhaps somebody is contemplating a conversion to Catholicism, or even just a faith conversion from an agnostic place or an atheistic place. They're hearing you and they're thinking, wow, there is something to this. Can they reach you somehow?
They can, if they'd like to. They can reach me on my cell phone. They can give me a call. My number is 586-307-2638. Happy to talk to anyone out there who wants to have a conversation. Or they could reach me through my email address, which would be through the Knights of Columbus, at gk13983 at mikfc.org.
But we have a couple minutes? Or is it totally time? Okay, oh my goodness. Oh, I wanted to get in a little more information for them before you go. Okay, again, just give the phone number once more. 586-307-2638. And I would like to thank you, Russ. Thank you. And to our listening audience, our family in Florida, we ask for your prayers. We want you to know that you can unify with us on our prayer request line. There are people that are committed to praying for your needs. And as always, remember to let Christ's light shine through you. Okay, we are visiting with Russ Morgan, a true, articulate man of God. It's so beautiful to hear your transition from, you were third generation Baptist into the Catholic faith. There was no screaming, kicking, pulling. You just surrendered to it.
I did.
And it actually came from taking to your children to catechism classes.
Yes.
So you were being filled with this beautiful knowledge of Jesus in an almost childlike fashion. And you've continued to grow and utilize your gifts and talents. What else are you doing in the parish?
Within the parish, I've tried to facilitate some of the evangelization work that they've done, and they're in large and small groups. I've also I currently work full time for the church at another parish at St. Clement of Rome in Romeo, and there it's everything that the church requires on a daily basis. Just to stay moving.
And you're contemplating
diaconate. I don't think so anymore. I am currently, however, discerning the possibility of entering formation to become a spiritual director, hopefully to focus on our young people, the young adults 18 to 28-year-olds.
Hang on. Do you have children that are in that age group?
I have a son who's 27, but he's not, I would say he's right at the edge of that. but I don't think he's not within that realm, the professional realm.
So, again, for our listening and viewing audience, a phone number or an email address. If they have any questions about your journey, if they'd like you to come and speak, or if they are hungering to know which direction they should go in, and you could offer a little knowledge.
Sure. My phone number is 586-307-2638. And you can reach me via email through the Knights of Columbus at gk13983@mikofc.org. Probably the one that has touched me the most and has really been sort of a beacon for me in the last few years comes from the 28th chapter of Matthew's Gospel, when he says, "Go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always to the end of the age."
And you took it seriously.
He was pretty explicit in what he wanted.
Amen. Do we have just a minute more? I would like to just read something from the Catechism, number 971 of the Catholic Catechism. All generations will call me blessed. The Church's devotion to the Blessed Virgin is intrinsic to Christian worship. The Church rightly honors the Blessed Virgin with special devotion. From the most ancient times, the Blessed Virgin has been honored with the title of Mother of God, to whose protection the faithful fly in all their dangers and needs. This very special devotion differs essentially from the adoration which is given to the Incarnate Word, and equally to the Father and the Holy Spirit, and greatly fosters this adoration. The liturgical feasts dedicated to the Mother of God and Marian prayer, such as the Rosary, is an epitome for the whole gospel. Express this devotion to the Virgin Mary. And we will understand why this is important and a connection to the Knights of Columbus with